Issa Chen had been walking the same factory floor for 8 years. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, she would clock in at Riverside Manufacturing and begin her rounds as quality control supervisor. She knew every machine, every sound, every smell of the place. The workers trusted her and management respected her attention to detail. On that Tuesday morning in March, everything seemed normal. The coffee in the break room was still terrible. The same old jokes were being told near the water cooler. The production lines were humming along like they always did. Lisa made her usual notes on her clipboard, checking safety protocols and equipment readings. But something felt different that morning. She couldn't put her finger on it at first. Maybe it was the way some of the newer managers kept looking at her during the morning meeting, or how they seemed to change the subject whenever she walked by their conversations. Lisa had always been good at reading people, and her instincts were telling her something was off. For the past few weeks, Lisa had been noticing things that didn't add up. Late-night trucks arriving at the back of the facility when no deliveries were scheduled. Barrels being moved around in areas where they shouldn't be. Strange chemical smells coming from sections of the plant that were supposed to be shut down for maintenance. When she asked about these things, her questions were brushed off with quick explanations that never quite made sense. The company had always prided itself on being environmentally responsible. There were posters all over the break room about their commitment to clean operations. Awards hung on the walls from local environmental groups. So why were there so many inconsistencies in what Lisa was seeing versus what the company claimed to be doing? Lisa had started keeping her own notes about these strange occurrences. She photographed the mysterious barrels with her phone. She wrote down license plate numbers of the unmarked trucks. She documented the times and dates of unusual activities. Something told her this information might be important someday. Around 2:30 that afternoon, Lisa was in Building C checking on the chemical processing equipment. This was routine work she had done thousands of times before. The machines were running normally. All the gauges showed proper readings and the safety systems appeared to be functioning correctly. She was just finishing her inspection when she heard voices coming from the storage area behind the main processing unit. 2 men in suits were talking in hushed tones. Lisa recognized one of them as Mr. Thompson, the plant manager. The other man was someone she had never seen before. They were standing next to a stack of barrels that weren't supposed to be there according to the facility layout she knew by heart. Lisa moved closer, trying to hear what they were discussing without being seen. What she heard made her blood run cold. They were talking about disposing of evidence and eliminating the problem before it gets out of hand. The stranger mentioned something about making it look like an equipment failure and how accidents happen all the time in facilities like this. Her heart started racing as she realized they might be talking about her. Had they discovered her notes and photographs? Did they know she had been asking questions about the mysterious activities around the plant? Lisa quietly backed away, trying to process what she had just overheard. She needed to think clearly about her next move. Should she go to the authorities immediately? Should she try to gather more evidence first? The smart thing would probably be to leave work early and figure out a plan from the safety of her home. But as she turned to head toward the exit, the fire alarm suddenly began blaring throughout the building. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. The automated voice system started announcing an emergency evacuation. Lisa looked around in confusion because nothing seemed to be wrong where she was standing. Then she smelled it. Smoke. And not just any smoke, but the acrid chemical smell that meant something dangerous was burning. The smell was getting stronger by the second, and she could see gray clouds starting to pour out of the ventilation systems. Lisa's training kicked in immediately. As a supervisor, she was responsible for making sure all workers in her section got out safely. She started running through Building C, checking each workstation and storage area to make sure no one was left behind. The smoke was getting thicker, making it harder to see and breathe. As she reached the far end of the building, she found Tony Rodriguez, one of the maintenance workers, unconscious near a bank of control panels. The equipment around him was sparking and smoking. Lisa grabbed Tony under the arms and started dragging him toward the nearest exit. He was heavy, and the smoke was making her dizzy, but she wasn't about to leave anyone behind. The emergency exit door was only 50 feet away when Lisa heard a loud rumbling sound behind her. She turned to see flames shooting out of the chemical processing area, where she had been working just minutes earlier. The heat hit her like a wall, and she realized they needed to get out immediately or they wouldn't make it at all. Lisa summoned every bit of strength she had and pulled Tony the remaining distance to the door. As she pushed it open, fresh air rushed in, giving her the energy boost she needed to drag him outside to safety. Other workers were already gathering in the parking lot, looking shocked and confused. The fire department and ambulances arrived within minutes. Lisa watched as firefighters in full protective gear entered the building she had just escaped from. Thick black smoke was now pouring out of multiple windows, and she could hear explosions coming from inside as chemicals and equipment were consumed by the flames. Paramedics checked both Lisa and Tony. He was still unconscious but breathing. Lisa felt dizzy and her throat burned from the smoke, but she was relatively okay. As she sat in the back of the ambulance getting oxygen, she watched her workplace being destroyed by a fire that had started so suddenly and spread so quickly that it didn't seem natural. That's when she remembered the conversation she had overheard between the plant manager and the stranger. Their words echoed in her mind, making it look like an equipment failure and accidents happen all the time. A chill ran down her spine as she realized this might not have been an accident at all. The official investigators would later determine that faulty wiring in the chemical processing equipment had caused the fire. They would call it a tragic mishap that could have happened anywhere. But Lisa knew what she had heard, and she knew what she had been investigating before the fire started. As the ambulance drove her to the hospital for further evaluation, Lisa made a decision. She was going to find out the truth about what really happened that day, no matter what it took. Because if her suspicions were correct, then someone had deliberately put her and her coworkers in danger, and that was something she couldn't let slide. The truth was going to come out, even if she had to uncover it herself. The hospital room was supposed to be a place of recovery, but Lisa felt more trapped than safe. For 3 days, she had been dealing with smoke inhalation and minor burns, but it was the parade of unexpected visitors that really made her uncomfortable. People who had barely acknowledged her existence at work were suddenly showing up with flowers and concerned expressions. On her second day in the hospital, Mr. Thompson, the plant manager, arrived with the biggest bouquet she had ever seen. He sat down in the chair next to her bed and spoke in a voice that was trying too hard to sound caring. He told her how grateful the company was that she had saved Tony's life, and how they wanted to make sure she was taken care of during her recovery. What bothered Lisa was how Mr. Thompson kept steering the conversation toward the fire. He seemed very interested in what she remembered about that day, especially about what she was doing in Building C right before the alarms went off. He asked several times if she had noticed anything unusual about the equipment or if she had seen anyone else in the area. Lisa played it safe and told him she didn't remember much due to the shock and smoke inhalation, but she watched his face carefully as she spoke, and she could see relief in his eyes when she claimed not to recall specific details. This reaction confirmed her growing suspicion that the fire wasn't the accident everyone was claiming it to be. The next morning brought an even more surprising visitor. A woman in an expensive suit introduced herself as Janet Miller from the company's legal department. Lisa had never seen her before, which was strange since she had been working at the facility for 8 years. Janet explained that she normally worked at the corporate headquarters but had come personally to discuss Lisa's situation. Janet pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase and placed it on the hospital bed table. She explained that the company wanted to offer Lisa a settlement for her pain and suffering from the workplace accident. The amount mentioned made Lisa's eyes widen. It was more money than she made in 3 years of work. But as Janet continued talking, Lisa realized there were strings attached to this generous offer. The settlement came with a comprehensive agreement that would prevent Lisa from discussing the fire or her experiences at the plant with anyone outside the company. She wouldn't be able to talk to reporters, government investigators, or even her own family about what happened. Janet presented this as a standard procedure, something the company did to protect everyone involved from unnecessary complications. She mentioned that several other employees who were affected by the fire had already signed similar agreements. The paperwork was ready to go, and all Lisa needed to do was sign on the dotted lines. Something about the urgency in Janet's voice made Lisa suspicious. Why was the company so eager to get these agreements signed before the official investigation was even completed? Why were they offering so much money for what they claimed was a simple equipment malfunction? Lisa told Janet she needed time to think about it and maybe have her own lawyer review the documents. Janet's friendly demeanor immediately became more businesslike. She explained that the offer was time-sensitive and might not be available if Lisa waited too long. She also mentioned that cooperating with the company's approach would be much better for Lisa's future career prospects. After Janet left, Lisa carefully read through the settlement documents. The legal language was complicated, but the message was clear. In exchange for the money, Lisa would essentially be agreeing to forget everything she knew about the fire and promise never to speak about it again. She would also be acknowledging that the company bore no responsibility for what happened. That afternoon, Lisa decided to call Tony Rodriguez to see how he was recovering. She had saved his life after all, and she was genuinely concerned about his condition. But when she called his house, his wife answered with a strange tone in her voice. Tony's wife, Maria, seemed nervous when Lisa identified herself. She said Tony was still in the hospital but at a different facility across town for specialized treatment. When Lisa asked which hospital, Maria became evasive and said she wasn't sure when he would be able to have visitors. This struck Lisa as odd because Tony had seemed to be recovering well when the paramedics took him away. She decided to do some checking on her own. After calling several hospitals in the area, she discovered that none of them had any record of a patient named Tony Rodriguez being admitted for fire-related injuries. Lisa's concern grew when she remembered that Tony had been working in the same area where she overheard that suspicious conversation between Mr. Thompson and the stranger. Had Tony seen or heard something that made him a problem for the company as well? She tried calling Tony's house again the next day, but this time the phone went straight to voicemail. The message was brief and impersonal, nothing like the warm greeting she remembered from previous times she had called about work-related matters. On her last day in the hospital, Lisa received another unexpected visitor. Detective Williams from the local fire department's investigation unit stopped by to ask a few routine questions about the incident. He seemed like a straightforward, honest person who genuinely wanted to understand what had caused the fire. Detective Williams explained that the preliminary investigation pointed to faulty wiring in the chemical processing equipment. However, he mentioned that some aspects of the fire seemed unusual. The way it spread so quickly and the intensity of the flames suggested that highly flammable materials might have been present in areas where they shouldn't have been. Lisa saw an opportunity to share her concerns without directly violating any agreements she hadn't signed yet. She mentioned that she had noticed some irregularities in the weeks leading up to the fire, including unauthorized chemical storage and unusual activity during off hours. She also expressed her concern about Tony's disappearance and the lack of information about his whereabouts. Detective Williams seemed very interested in what Lisa was telling him. He took detailed notes and asked follow-up questions about the specific things she had observed. He also promised to look into Tony's situation and make sure he was actually receiving the medical care he needed. As Detective Williams was preparing to leave, he handed Lisa his business card and told her to call him if she remembered anything else, or if anyone tried to pressure her not to cooperate with the official investigation. He mentioned that it was not uncommon for companies to try to limit their liability by discouraging employees from talking to investigators. After the detective left, Lisa felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She was glad that someone in authority seemed to be taking her concerns seriously, but she was also worried about what might happen if the company found out she had been talking to investigators. That evening, as Lisa was preparing to be discharged from the hospital, Janet Miller made another unexpected appearance. This time her tone was much more direct and less friendly than before. She wanted to know if Lisa had made a decision about the settlement offer. Janet also mentioned that she had heard Lisa had been talking to the fire department investigator. She reminded Lisa that it would be in everyone's best interest if she focused on her recovery, rather than trying to second-guess the experts who were handling the official investigation. The implied threat in Janet's words was clear. Lisa realized that the company was monitoring her activities and was prepared to take action if she didn't cooperate with their version of events. This confirmed her suspicion that there was much more to the fire than a simple equipment malfunction. As she packed her belongings to leave the hospital, Lisa made a decision. She wasn't going to sign the settlement agreement, at least not yet. She was going to find out what really happened that day, and she was going to make sure Tony was safe. If the company was working so hard to cover something up, then there had to be something important to uncover, The truth was out there, and Lisa was determined to find it, no matter what obstacles the company put in her way. Lisa's own investigation began with a simple internet search from her home computer. She typed in Riverside Manufacturing along with words like accidents, fires, and safety violations. What she found in the next few hours would change everything she thought she knew about her former employer. The first article that caught her attention was from a newspaper in Ohio, dated just 2 years earlier. Chemical plant fire injures 6 workers, read the headline. The facility belonged to Riverside Manufacturing's parent company, Morrison Industries. According to the report, the fire had been caused by faulty equipment, and the company had reached settlements with all affected workers. Lisa's heart started beating faster as she continued reading. The circumstances described in the Ohio incident were remarkably similar to what had happened at her workplace. A sudden fire in a chemical processing area, equipment that had recently passed safety inspections, and workers who had been asking questions about unusual activities at the plant. She expanded her search to include Morrison Industries and found even more disturbing information. Over the past 5 years, there had been 7 similar incidents at different facilities owned by the company. Each time, the official cause was listed as equipment malfunction or human error. Each time, the affected workers had signed settlement agreements that prevented them from discussing the incidents publicly. What made these cases even more suspicious was a pattern Lisa noticed in the timing. In every instance, the fire or explosion had occurred within weeks of employees reporting concerns about environmental violations or safety issues to management. It seemed like more than just coincidence. Lisa decided to dig deeper into her own facility's recent history. She remembered that about 6 months before the fire, several workers had expressed concerns about the late-night truck deliveries and the unusual chemical smells coming from supposedly inactive areas of the plant. These workers had filed formal complaints with management and had even mentioned contacting environmental regulators. She made a list of these workers and started trying to contact them. The results were troubling. 3 of them had been transferred to other facilities shortly before the fire. 2 others had been laid off for what the company called performance issues. Only one was still working at the plant, and when Lisa called him, he seemed frightened and unwilling to talk about anything related to the company. The worker who was still employed, David Kim, agreed to meet Lisa for coffee at a small diner across town. He looked nervous when he arrived and kept glancing around as if he expected to be followed. David confirmed what Lisa had suspected about the pre-fire activities at the plant. According to David, the company had been illegally dumping chemical waste in a remote area behind the facility for at least 2 years. The late-night trucks Lisa had observed were hauling away barrels of toxic materials that should have been disposed of through proper channels. Instead of paying for expensive hazardous waste disposal, the company was simply burying the chemicals in unlined pits on their own property. David explained that several workers had discovered this operation and had threatened to report it to the Environmental Protection Agency. The company had initially tried to buy their silence with promotions and bonuses, but when that didn't work, they started using more aggressive tactics. The workers who filed formal complaints had been systematically eliminated from the workplace through transfers, layoffs, or in some cases, intimidation. David had kept quiet about what he knew because he had a family to support and couldn't afford to lose his job. But the fire had changed everything for him. David revealed something that made Lisa's blood run cold. On the day of the fire, he had overheard a conversation between plant management and some men in suits who weren't regular employees. They had been discussing permanent solutions to the problem of workers who knew too much about the illegal dumping operation. The fire, according to what David had overheard, wasn't just meant to destroy evidence of the environmental crimes. It was also intended to eliminate key witnesses who could testify about the company's illegal activities. The fact that Lisa and Tony had survived was apparently not part of the original plan. David also confirmed Lisa's suspicions about Tony's disappearance. He had heard through the workplace grapevine that Tony hadn't been transferred to another hospital for specialized treatment. Instead, he had been moved to a safe location after receiving threats from unknown individuals who wanted him to keep quiet about what he had witnessed. Armed with this information, Lisa decided to contact Detective Williams again. When she called his direct number, she was told he had been reassigned to a different case and was no longer handling the fire investigation. The new investigator, Detective Johnson, seemed less interested in pursuing the environmental angle and more focused on wrapping up the case quickly. This setback only strengthened Lisa's resolve to find the truth on her own. She started researching environmental crimes and corporate cover-ups, looking for experts who might be able to help her understand the bigger picture of what Morrison Industries was doing. Through an online forum for environmental activists, Lisa connected with Dr. Patricia Wong, a former EPA scientist who had been tracking corporate environmental crimes for over a decade. Dr. Wong had left the EPA after becoming frustrated with political interference in important investigations, and she now worked as an independent consultant, helping communities fight corporate pollution. When Lisa shared her story with Dr. Wong, the scientist immediately recognized the pattern. She had been investigating Morrison Industries for 3 years as part of a larger study on corporate environmental crimes. The company was suspected of similar illegal dumping operations at multiple facilities across the country. Dr. Wong explained that Morrison Industries had developed a sophisticated system for avoiding environmental regulations. They would set up dumping operations at remote facilities, use intimidation and bribery to keep workers quiet, and when necessary, stage accidents to eliminate evidence and witnesses. The fires and explosions at Morrison Industries facilities weren't accidents at all. They were carefully planned operations designed to destroy evidence of environmental crimes and silence potential whistleblowers. The company had been getting away with it for years because they had connections with local officials and regulators who were willing to accept their explanations. Without conducting thorough investigations, Dr. Wong had been trying to build a case against Morrison Industries for years, but she needed witnesses who were willing to testify about what they had seen. Most of the workers who had knowledge of the illegal activities had been scared into silence by threats or bought off with generous settlement agreements. Lisa realized she was in a unique position to help expose the truth. She had first-hand knowledge of the illegal dumping operation. She had witnessed the suspicious conversations before the fire, and she hadn't signed a settlement agreement that would prevent her from speaking out. But Dr. Wong warned Lisa that she would be taking a significant risk by coming forward. Morrison Industries had a history of using aggressive tactics against people who threatened their operations. Previous whistleblowers had faced harassment, legal intimidation, and in some cases physical threats. Despite the risks, Lisa decided to move forward. She began working with Dr. Wong to document everything she knew about the illegal activities at the Riverside manufacturing facility. They collected soil samples from the dumping area behind the plant, gathered testimony from other workers, and compiled evidence of the pattern of suspicious accidents at Morrison Industries facilities. As they built their case, Lisa started receiving strange phone calls at home. The callers would hang up when she answered, or sometimes they would simply stay on the line without speaking. Her car was broken into twice, though nothing valuable was stolen. She began to feel like she was being watched whenever she left her house. The intimidation tactics only convinced Lisa that she was on the right track. Morrison Industries was clearly desperate to keep their illegal activities secret, and they were willing to go to great lengths to silence anyone who threatened to expose them. Lisa knew she was taking a huge risk by continuing her investigation, but she also knew that stopping now would mean letting the company get away with crimes that had hurt dozens of workers and contaminated the environment in multiple communities. The truth needed to come out no matter what it cost her personally. The breakthrough in Lisa's investigation came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after she started working with Dr. Wong, she received a mysterious package in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was a flash drive containing thousands of internal company documents from Morrison Industries. The documents revealed the shocking scope of what the company had been doing. Internal emails discussed problem employees and cleanup operations at facilities across 6 states. Financial records showed payments to a private security firm called Apex. Solutions for services described only as personnel management and facility maintenance. Most disturbing of all were the detailed reports from Apex Solutions that described surveillance operations on company employees. Lisa found her own name in several of these reports, along with descriptions of her daily routines, her contact information, and assessments of how much of a threat she posed to company operations. Dr. Wong was amazed by the evidence contained in the documents. They provided a clear picture of a criminal organization that operated like a well-organized machine. Morrison Industries would identify facilities where illegal dumping could be conducted safely, set up operations using local employees who needed jobs, and then systematically eliminate anyone who discovered what was happening. The documents also revealed the identity of the mysterious stranger Lisa had seen talking with plant manager Thompson on the day of the fire. His name was Robert Nash, and he was the head of operations for Apex Solutions. According to his company profile, Nash was a former military contractor who specialized in problem resolution for corporate clients. Lisa and Dr. Wong decided they needed to find Tony Rodriguez to get his testimony about what he had witnessed. Using the information in the leaked documents, they discovered that Tony was being held at a motel across state lines under the supervision of Apex Solutions personnel. Dr. Wong contacted a network of activists and journalists who had experience dealing with corporate whistleblower cases. Within 48 hours, they had organized a team to safely extract Tony from his location and bring him to a secure facility where he could provide testimony without fear of retaliation. When they finally met Tony face to face, Lisa was shocked by his condition. He was physically healthy, but clearly traumatized by weeks of isolation and intimidation. Tony explained that on the day of the fire, he had been working near the chemical storage area when he overheard Robert Nash giving detailed instructions to plant manager Thompson about how to stage the explosion. According to Tony, Nash had explained that the fire needed to look like an equipment malfunction, but it also needed to be intense enough to destroy all evidence of the illegal dumping operation. The chemicals that had been stored in the building were specifically chosen because they would burn hot and fast, leaving behind no trace of the toxic waste that had been illegally disposed of over the past 2 years. Tony had tried to leave the area when he realized what was being planned, but Nash had spotted him and ordered Thompson to make sure he couldn't warn anyone about what was going to happen. That's why Tony had been found unconscious near the control panels, and he had been deliberately incapacitated to prevent him from evacuating other workers or alerting authorities. The plan had been for both Lisa and Tony to be caught in the fire and eliminated as potential witnesses. The fact that Lisa had managed to rescue Tony and get them both out safely had been a major setback for Morrison Industries. And Apex Solutions. Tony also revealed that he wasn't the only worker who had been targeted by the company. Over the past 3 years, at least 12 employees at various Morrison Industries facilities had died in workplace accidents after discovering evidence of illegal activities. The company had perfected a system for making murders look like industrial mishaps. With Tony's testimony and the leaked documents, Lisa and Dr. Wong now had enough evidence to approach federal authorities. But they needed to be careful about who they contacted, because the documents revealed that Morrison Industries had informants within several local and state regulatory agencies. Dr. Wong used her contacts within the environmental movement to connect with Agent Rebecca Torres, a federal investigator who specialized in corporate environmental crimes. Agent Torres had been trying to build a case against Morrison Industries for 2 years, but had been frustrated by the lack of witnesses willing to testify. When Agent Torres reviewed the evidence that Lisa and Dr. Wong had compiled, she immediately recognized its significance. The leaked documents provided detailed proof of a conspiracy that went far beyond environmental crimes. Morrison Industries and Apex Solutions had been operating a criminal enterprise that included murder, intimidation, bribery, and systematic destruction of evidence. Agent Torres explained that the federal government had been investigating similar patterns at other large corporations. But Morrison Industries had been particularly difficult to prosecute because they had been so effective at silencing potential witnesses. Lisa's courage in coming forward, combined with Tony's testimony and the leaked documents, finally provided the breakthrough that federal investigators needed. Within days of Lisa's first meeting with Agent Torres, a joint task force was formed involving the FBI, the EPA, and the Department of Justice. The investigation expanded rapidly as agents began raiding Morrison Industries facilities across the country and arresting members of the Apex Solutions network. Lisa was placed in protective custody along with Tony and several other witnesses who had come forward after news of the investigation became public. She learned that there had been dozens of other workers who had suspected what was happening at their facilities, but had been too frightened to speak out until they knew they wouldn't be facing the company's retaliation alone. As the investigation progressed, the full scope of Morrison Industries' criminal activities became clear. The company had been illegally dumping toxic waste at 23 different facilities over a period of 8 years. The environmental damage was catastrophic, with groundwater contamination affecting entire communities and agricultural areas. The human cost was even more shocking. Federal investigators determined that at least 31 people had died in staged accidents at Morrison Industries facilities, including workers, environmental activists, and even some regulatory officials who had gotten too close to uncovering the truth. Dozens more had been injured, intimidated, or forced into hiding. Robert Nash and his team at Apex Solutions were arrested on charges including murder, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence showed that they had been operating as a criminal organization, using violence and intimidation to protect Morrison Industries' illegal activities. Plant manager Thompson and several other Morrison Industries executives were also arrested and charged with conspiracy, environmental crimes, and accessory to murder. The company's CEO and board of directors claimed they had no knowledge of the illegal activities, but the leaked documents contained emails and financial records that proved their direct involvement in planning and funding the criminal operations. Lisa found herself at the center of one of the largest corporate crime investigations in recent history. Her decision to question the official story about the fire had led to the exposure of a criminal network that had been operating with impunity for nearly a decade. As she prepared to testify before a federal grand jury, Lisa reflected on how much her life had changed since that day in March, when the alarm started blaring at the Riverside manufacturing plant. She had gone from being a quiet quality control supervisor to being a key witness in a case that would hopefully bring justice to dozens of victims and prevent future corporate crimes. The intimidation and threats she had faced were nothing compared to what other victims of Morrison Industries had endured. Lisa knew that her testimony could help ensure that the people responsible for so much suffering would finally be held accountable for their actions. The truth was finally coming out, and Lisa was determined to see it through to the end, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The federal courthouse was packed with reporters, victims' families, and community activists on the day Lisa was scheduled to testify before the grand jury. What had started as her personal quest for the truth about a workplace fire had become a landmark case that would reshape how corporate environmental crimes were prosecuted. Lisa sat in the witness waiting room, reviewing her notes one final time. Over the past 6 months, she had worked closely with federal prosecutors to prepare testimony that would help them present the full scope of Morrison Industries' criminal activities. The evidence they had compiled was overwhelming, but Lisa knew that her first-hand account of what happened at the Riverside manufacturing facility would be crucial in helping the jury understand how the conspiracy actually worked. When she was called to testify, Lisa walked into the courtroom with confidence. She had been through too much to be intimidated now. The defendant's table was filled with executives from Morrison Industries and operatives from Apex Solutions, including Robert Nash, the man whose conversation she had overheard on the day of the fire. Lisa's testimony lasted for 3 days. She described in detail the illegal dumping operation she had discovered, the suspicious activities she had documented in the weeks before the fire, and the conversation between plant manager Thompson and Robert Nash that had revealed the planned nature of the explosion. She explained how the company had tried to silence her with generous settlement offers and legal threats, and how their intimidation tactics had only convinced her that she was on the right track. Lisa also testified about the systematic pattern of staged accidents at Morrison Industries facilities and the network of corruption that had allowed the company to operate with impunity for so many years. The prosecutors used Lisa's testimony to introduce hundreds of documents that had been seized during raids on Morrison Industries offices. Internal emails showed executives discussing permanent solutions to whistleblower problems. Financial records revealed millions of dollars in payments to Apex Solutions for special projects at facilities where suspicious accidents later occurred. Perhaps most damaging was a recorded phone conversation between Morrison Industries CEO Michael Barrett and Robert Nash, discussing plans to eliminate problem employees at the Riverside facility. The recording had been discovered on Nash's personal computer and provided direct evidence of the conspiracy to commit murder. Tony Rodriguez also testified, describing how he had been knocked unconscious to prevent him from warning other workers about the planned explosion. His testimony was particularly powerful because he had been an innocent bystander who had nearly lost his life simply because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dr. Wong testified as an expert witness, explaining the environmental impact of Morrison Industries' illegal dumping operations. She presented evidence showing that toxic chemicals from the company's facilities had contaminated groundwater supplies serving over 200,000 people across 6 states. The cleanup costs alone were estimated at more than $2 billion. Other witnesses included family members of workers who had died in suspicious accidents at Morrison Industries facilities. Their testimony painted a heartbreaking picture of lives destroyed by corporate greed and the lengths some companies will go to protect their profits. The defense attorneys tried to argue that their clients had been acting within the scope of legitimate business activities and that any illegal actions had been taken by rogue employees without corporate approval. But the evidence was too overwhelming to support this narrative. After 6 weeks of testimony, the grand jury returned indictments against 47 individuals and 3 corporations connected to the Morrison Industries conspiracy. The charges included murder, conspiracy to commit murder, environmental crimes, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. The trials that followed made headlines across the country. Robert Nash and 3 other Apex Solutions operatives were convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Plant manager Thompson and 12 other Morrison Industries executives received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years in federal prison. CEO Michael Barrett was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 35 years in prison. During his sentencing hearing, families of the victims were allowed to make impact statements. Lisa listened as parents, spouses, and children described how the loss of their loved ones had devastated their lives. Morrison Industries was ordered to pay over $4 billion in fines and restitution. The company was also required to fund comprehensive environmental cleanup efforts at all of their contaminated facilities and establish a victim compensation fund for families affected by their crimes. The Apex Solutions network was completely dismantled, with the company's assets seized and distributed to victims' families. Federal investigators used information from the Morrison Industries case to launch investigations into similar corporate security firms, leading to additional prosecutions and the exposure of other criminal networks. For Lisa, the conclusion of the legal proceedings brought a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back the people who had died or undo the environmental damage that had been caused. She had played a crucial role in exposing one of the largest corporate conspiracies in American history, but the personal cost had been significant. Lisa's life had been completely transformed by her decision to investigate the fire at her workplace. She could no longer work in the manufacturing industry because her role as a whistleblower had made her unemployable at most companies. The constant stress of the investigation and trials had taken a toll on her health and personal relationships. But Lisa also felt a deep sense of pride in what she had accomplished. Her courage in questioning the official narrative had led to justice for dozens of victims and their families. The precedent set by the Morrison Industries case would make it much more difficult for other corporations to get away with similar crimes in the future. Dr. Wong offered Lisa a position with her environmental consulting firm, focusing on helping communities fight corporate pollution. Lisa accepted, knowing that her unique experience and expertise could help prevent other tragedies like the ones perpetrated by Morrison Industries. The Riverside manufacturing facility was permanently shut down and designated as a Superfund cleanup site. The building where Lisa had worked for 8 years was demolished, and the contaminated soil was excavated and properly disposed of at enormous cost to Morrison Industries' remaining assets. A memorial was erected at the site, honoring the victims of Morrison Industries' crimes across all of their facilities. Lisa attended the dedication ceremony, along with families of the victims and other survivors of the company's criminal activities. As she stood looking at the memorial, Lisa reflected on the chain of events that had started with her noticing some unusual truck deliveries and chemical smells at her workplace. Her decision to ask questions and document what she observed had ultimately led to the exposure of a criminal network that had operated undetected for nearly a decade. The experience had taught Lisa that ordinary people have the power to make extraordinary changes when they have the courage to stand up for what's right. Corporate criminals count on workers and communities staying silent in the face of intimidation and threats. But when people like Lisa refuse to be silenced, even the most powerful criminal organizations can be brought to justice. Lisa's story became the subject of documentaries, books, and congressional hearings on corporate crime. She was invited to speak at universities and conferences about the importance of whistleblower protections and environmental justice. Years later, Lisa would still occasionally receive letters from workers at other companies who had discovered suspicious activities and were deciding whether to speak out. She always encouraged them to follow their instincts and contact appropriate authorities, while also being honest about the risks and challenges they might face. The Morrison Industries case had proven that what corporations call accidents aren't always what they seem to be. Sometimes what looks like a tragic mishap is actually evidence of crimes that go far deeper than anyone imagined. And sometimes it takes just one person with the courage to ask questions to bring the whole conspiracy crashing down. Lisa had learned that the truth might be hidden, but it's never really lost. It just takes someone brave enough to go looking for it, no matter how dangerous the search might be.